Welcome to the Nordic Diversity Connections in Arts and Culture seminar. Let's begin with a big thank you to the wonderful musicians from Oulu who opened our event, Haniye Hadizadeh and Hamed Jalili. Give them a big round of applause. So, welcome to the Nordic Diversity Connections in Arts and Culture seminar. Today, I will be your host, Silva Belghiti. This is my sign name, Silva. And my name, fingerspelled, Silva Belghiti. I'm a sign language actor. I'm a white woman. And today I'm wearing a black dress. My hair is done in a ponytail, and I'm wearing also big dangling earrings. My dress is black with black dots. We also use, I use the pronouns she and her. How wonderful to see you all here in this hall today in Oulu. At Oulu City Hall, my childhood hometown. This is actually my first time inside the building, even though I passed it so many times as a child. But I've never visited this City Hall. But I might be misremembering things. Maybe I visited sometime when I was a little child, but when I look around, I really can't remember being in this hall, banquet hall. So it's a really lovely thing to be your host here today. A true honor. Now let's move on to some practical information. So this seminar acknowledges and upholds a safer space principles. Everyone has the right to be fully themselves, to be respected and heard. Please give space to others and ensure everyone has an opportunity to participate. Every opinion matters. If you give feedback, do so constructively and respectfully. Let's respect each other's privacy and handle sensitive topics with care. There is no room for mocking, exclusion, or discrimination of any kind. Let's not make assumptions based on appearances or actions. If you accidentally or unintentionally offend someone, apologize. Together, we create a safer space and a welcoming atmosphere. If you do experience or witness any harassment, our contact person is Maija Lummepuro. She's wearing a blue shirt and standing over here, to your right. Maija Lummepuro is from the Ministry of Education and Culture. Maija and all the other organizers can easily be identified. They're wearing blue shirts with a large white star. Today, we welcome a diverse audience. We come from different backgrounds, we speak different languages, and we have different needs. So let's look after each other and give one another space. We aim to make this seminar as accessible as possible. Accessible toilets are on the first floor, and gender-neutral toilets are located on the opposite side of the entrance hall. This main hall is equipped with an induction loop, and on the first floor there is a quiet room with 3 small sofas and a yoga mat. It's free to use, but remember to respect each other and keep it a quiet room. For any accessibility-related questions, please contact Anna Sidorova. She's also wearing a blue shirt over at your left. As you may notice, I have my own sign language interpreters here with me. And the voice you're hearing is Jenny and Ulla-Maja. Plenary sessions will also be accessible via speech-to-text interpretation provided by Ida and Pia. The language of the event is in English, and we kindly ask you to also pose your questions and comments in English. Please also note that the seminar will be video recorded, and there will be taken atmosphere photos. If you do not wish to appear in these photos, please ask the organizers for a wristband, which helps photographers identify your preference. Now, let the seminar begin. This seminar is part of the Finland and Åland presidency program of the Nordic Council of Ministers 2025. It's organized by the Ministry of Education and Culture in collaboration with key partners: Arts Promotion Center Finland, City of Oulu, Oulu 2026, the Culture for All service, and Globe Art Point. A wide international cooperation network has also contributed to the planning. Our first speaker today is Mari-Leena Talvitie. She is the Minister of Science and Culture in Finland, and she's presented by video. She's wearing a blue suit and she uses the pronouns she, her.
Hyvä seminaariväki. On ilo tuoda teille tervehdys Suomen tiede- ja kulttuuriministerinä ja toivottaa teidät tervetulleeksi Suomen ja Ahvenanmaan yhteisen puheenjohtajuusohjelman päättävään seminaariin. On hienoa, että olette koolla kotikaupungissani Oulussa. Oulu on 420-vuotias kaupunki, jossa juuri eilen illalla pidimme Oulun 150-vuotisjuhlavaltuuston kokouksen. Eli demokraattinen päätöksenteko kaupunginvaltuusto, jonka puheenjohtajana sain toimia ennen kansanedustajuutta, täytti 150 vuotta. Tänään aiheena on kulttuurisen moninaisuuden ja osallisuuden kysymykset pohjoismaisessa yhteistyössä. Nopeiden muutosten ja epävarmuuden keskellä yhteistyöverkostot ovat meille ensiarvoisen tärkeitä. Toivon, että Oulu tarjoaa teille kaikille hyvät puitteet aktiiviselle verkostoitumiselle pohjoismaisten ja Baltian kollegojen kesken. Pohjoismaisen kulttuuriyhteistyön lähtökohtana on, että kaikilla on yhtäläiset osallistumismahdollisuudet. Taiteen ja kulttuurin vapaus sekä vapaa ja riippumaton media luovat perustaa sananvapaudelle, tiedon jakamiselle, demokraattiselle osallistumiselle ja vuoropuhelulle. Näitä periaatteita on erityisen tärkeää vaalia suurten yhteiskunnallisten muutosten ja haasteiden aikana. Alkuperäiskansojen ja vähemmistön kielten ja kulttuurin sekä näiden ryhmien kielellisten ja kulttuuristen oikeuksia on tärkeää vahvistaa pohjoismaisessa kulttuuriyhteistyössä. Saamelaiset ja useat muut vähemmistöt toimivat luonnollisesti yli maiden rajojen. Tällä on suuri merkitys pohjoismaiselle yhteenkuuluvuudelle. Lähivuosina kiinnitetään erityisesti huomiota yhteiskuntien kestävyyteen ja demokratiaan. Kulttuuri on jokaisen oikeus ja osallistumisen kautta myös demokratia ja yhteisöllisyys vahvistuvat. Viime vuosien tapahtumat ovat osoittaneet, että jatkuva vapaan taiteellisen ilmaisun suojeleminen ja varautumisen vahvistaminen kulttuuriperinnön suojelemiseksi ovat alueita, jotka tarvitsevat sekä keskustelua että yhteistä toimintaa. Pääministeri Petteri Orpon hallitusohjelman mukaisesti olemme laatineet valtioneuvoston kulttuuripoliittisen selonteon. Esittelin selonteon eduskunnalle alkuvuonna ja eduskunta on käsitellyt sitä useassa valiokunnassa ja tällä viikolla sitä käsitellään eduskunnan suuressa salissa. Selonteko linjaa maamme kulttuuripolitiikan tavoitteita ja toimia aina 2040-luvulle asti. Selonteossa painotetaan kulttuurin perustan vahvistumista, uudistumista ja elinvoimaisuutta sekä luovien alojen yhteiskunnallisen vaikuttavuuden kasvua. Kulttuuri on jokaisen oikeus ja kulttuuri kuuluu kaikille. Kun tänään suuntaamme katseemme kulttuurin laajaan työkenttään ja kasvun mahdollisuuksiin, on tärkeää tunnistaa sen monimuotoisuus kaikessa laajuudessaan. Pidän arvokkaana, että tänään aiheena on kulttuurinen moninaisuus ja monikielisyys sekä niiden mahdollisuudet ja esteet. Keskeistä on tunnistaa oikeat tavat edistää eri väestöryhmien osallisuutta kulttuuriin, riippumatta taustasta, kielestä, sijainnista, iästä tai taloudellisista resursseista. Jotta onnistuisimme yhteisissä tavoitteissamme, on tärkeää tehdä työtä sen eteen, että saamme kulttuurialalle sen tarvitsemaa muutosvoimaa niin toimijuuteen, rakenteisiin kuin rahoitusmalleihinkin. Yhteistyötä tarvitaan joka tasolla. Tänään te kaikki tuotte oman tärkeän osaamisenne ja innovatiivisen panoksenne tähän työhön. Haluan toivottaa teille inspiroivia päiviä Oulussa, ensi vuoden Euroopan kulttuuripääkaupungissa. Oulu tosiaan toimii 2026 Euroopan kulttuuripääkaupunkina yhdessä 39 pohjoisen kunnan kanssa. Suomen kulttuuripoliittisen visiomme tavoin tehdään työtä siten, että monimuotoinen ja saavutettava kulttuuri on jokaisen oikeus.
Next, we will hear from the mayor of the city of Oulu, Ari Alatossava. And then Pia Rantala-Korhonen, CEO of the Oulu 2026 Foundation. Welcome. But before you begin your speeches, I will kindly ask you to please start with a brief visual self-description and mention your pronouns, as the minister just did. Welcome.
Dear representatives of Nordic ministers, ministries of culture, leading experts, authorities, dear seminar delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to welcome you all to Oulu. Tervetuloa Ouluun. As you see, I'm mostly wear formal clothes like this. My working days are full of meetings, and but after the work, during my leisure time, I want to spend my time outside. So I most likely wear hiking outfit and a beanie. The word Oulu originally comes from Sami language, and it means melted snow or floodwater. So today, the connection between Sami culture and Oulu is of course through people and education. There are about 10,000 Sami people living in Finland, and 1,000 of them live in Oulu. So Oulu is the biggest Sami village in Finland. Kielakas Institute at the University of Oulu has national responsibility for the highest education and research in Sami languages and Sami culture in Finland. And at the University of Oulu, Sami language and culture can be studied as a major subject. Today, Oulu can be described with the words like young, well-educated, innovative, and happy. We are Finland's fifth largest city, 216,000 people. Of these, 35,000 are students, which makes Oulu one of the youngest cities in Europe. Average age is less than 40 years. Every third adult person has a university degree. In the past 2 years, the population is increased by 4,500 people, and about 60% of them comes from the other countries, mainly from Asia. They come to study and work here. Last year, European Commission named Oulu the third most innovative city in Europe. So the technologies developed here in Oulu is used by billions of people daily. As you may know, Finland has been nominated or named the happiest country in the world for 7 or 8 years in a row. Sometimes we Finns wonder how this is possible. Maybe the questions have been done wrongly. Anyway, Oulu has been ranked number 13 on the list of the happiest cities in the world. Well, this means that your seminar here in Oulu can only be happy and successful one. Well, in recent years, we have made significant investments in culture. Of course, one of our ambitious projects is the European Capital of Culture, year 2026, and you will hear a little bit more about it, and Pia is there. We are investing in cultural institutions promoting the well-being and happiness of our residents. The Museum and Science Center, Tiima, will be a place where science and art meets. Tiima, by the way, means Sand class, or our class in English. Our main library is being renovated to better the needs of a modern, welcoming city. It will also include the Children's Culture Center, Kotilo, which will offer creative experiences for our youngest residents. And Kotilo in English means seashell. And it's invented by the children, by themselves. Of course, culture is not only buildings, it's about people and collaboration and content. I give you 3 examples of that. The city of Oulu, we have 14 diverse art communities as a local culture contact partners. The purpose of this collaboration and partnership is to strengthen the city's vibrant cultural scene with dance, film, literature, visual art, and music. Another example is Oulu for All project. Our goal is to make Oulu a more inclusive community by actively working to prevent discrimination and racism. We have developed a comprehensive action plan. It's the first in Finland, And we have started to train our employees to help them recognize and address different forms of racism. A third example is the way how Oulu supports learning in science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, often called STEAM. In our city, young students get involved. For instance, this Oulu pin, for example, is designed, made, and sold online by our elementary school children. Oulu is active in many international art and culture fields. We are the member of UNESCO Creative Cities Network for art, media art. We are also recognized as a UNICEF child-friendly city. And recently we joined LUCI, the international networks of cities focused on urban lighting. And thanks to this Oulu 2026 project, we are now proud members of the European Capital of Cultures family. By working together at the local, national, and international level, we make sure that our city stay inclusive and welcoming in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this seminar will be inspiring and fruitful for all of you. And of course, I use this opportunity to warmly welcome you to return Oulu, especially as we celebrate innovations, technology, and culture throughout the year 2026. So thank you very much. Kiitos.
Dear friends, dear colleagues, dear guests, it's so nice to see you here in Oulu. On behalf of the Culture Foundation of Oulu, I want to welcome you warmly to Oulu today and especially next year. I'm wearing a blue jacket, purple jumper, jeans. I have brown hair, and in my mother language I use pronouns hän, which doesn't refer to any sex, but in English I have been taught to use she and her. But in Finnish language we don't think in that way. As the mayor already mentioned, Oulu will be the European Capital of Culture next year. Diversity and equality are the core values of this initiative of European Union. The main theme of Oulu 2026 is cultural climate change. We want to reconnect people with culture and offer everyone opportunities to join culture, not only as audience, but also as creative makers. Our foundation will produce 15 major projects. In total, there will be about 3,000 events around a broad area of Oulu 2026. The cultural program will be implemented together with the 39 municipalities in the region. Most of the program has been compiled through 3 open calls. In total, we have got over 2,000 proposals. We have tried to make the process as easy as possible and recognize new cultural phenomena. But still, I must ask myself, is there anyone missing from the audience or the makers? Selection is always an exercise of power. Those of us with formal education of arts and culture have the power to define what is art and culture, what is worth financing and performing. One of our sub-themes is cool contrast. We want to break the bubbles which keep us apart from each other. This is essential if we want to build an equal and diverse city where everyone matters. Diversity can only flourish in peace. One of the flagship artworks of Oulu 2026 is Layers of Peace Machine, created by Eco Collective. The construction of the work is going on here at the City Hall. You can see it. The artwork is based on Timo Honkela's book Peace Machine. Honkela wanted to build a machine which could help the mankind to solve the conflicts without violence. He passed away in May 2020, but we want to continue his work with our Layers of Peace Machine. And you can take part in Peace Machine and become a peacemaker. The layer of sharing is already open for everyone on the project website, peacemachine.eu. You can share your own thoughts and memories of peace, and they will be part of this fantastic artwork. So you are warmly welcome to Oulu next year to join our rich and versatile cultural program. I wish you and us a very fruitful days here in Oulu. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilena, Ari, and Pia. Big applause for you. Now we will move on to our first keynote. From Oslo to Oulu, a cross-country perspective on diversity efforts and gaps in the Nordic-Baltic region. This will be presented by Sajjad Shukohi, who is an independent researcher from Dublin in Ireland. So welcome. And please remember to describe yourself as well.
It's still morning, so good morning. And in case you haven't woken up again, good morning. So my name is Sajjad Shukohi, and I'm non-white, I'm a man of color. I'm wearing a semi-casual jacket, which actually has signs of a snowflake on it, and it's navy. And I'm wearing a turtleneck, which is in brown and dark brown trousers and dark brown shoes. Sorry, dark navy trousers and dark brown shoes. And I use the pronoun as in Finnish. In Persian, we don't have gender, so we say u, but in English, it's he or him. And I'm very much delighted to be here together with you today. And I have a presentation, and I'm looking for the wire to connect my laptop to the screen. Oh, it's coming from there. Okay, thank you very much. So it's really great. It's a great pleasure to be here in Oulu, and it's so fitting that we meet in a city preparing to become a European capital of culture, because Oulu reminds us that culture can't just live in reports or policies. It has to be real, practical, and rooted in the diversity of its people. The title of today's talk is From Oslo to Oulu, and it is about more than geography. It's about the policy distance our region has traveled, and we are finally moving beyond acknowledging diversity and inclusion as a goal and starting to build systems that make it measurable, functional, and lived. Today, I'll take you on a short but focused journey through Norway, Sweden, Estonia, and Finland, looking at how each country is approaching diversity. And as we go, I invite you to keep 3 guiding questions in mind, our lenses for the morning. Number 1, evidence and knowledge. And the question is, what data are we using to make our decisions? 2, competence and dialogue. How are we tackling internal resistance and building skills? And number 3, resources and gaps. And the question would be, are our ambitions backed by real human and financial capital? Who is a policymaker in this room? Give me a thumbs up. Great. If you're a policymaker, I'll speak to you about the structure and accountability. And who's an artist here? Amazing. So if you're an artist, I'll speak to you about access and recognition. And if you're a researcher, amazing. I'll speak to you about evidence and meaning. And if you're all 3, which I believe some of us are, including myself, then this convention, I'm not a policymaker, sorry. And if so, then this conversation is for you. Okay, let's start in Oslo. As the pilot says, ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. And we're taking off from Oslo. Norway's story is a good reminder of how regional collaboration can evolve into national strength. As you can see, the title is Evidence, Coordination, and Reconciliation. And it is from Nordic seat to national reconciliation, and I will explain in a second why it is so. In 2020, the government gave Arts and Culture Norway the central task of acting as the national coordinator for diversity, inclusion, and participation across the arts. This idea didn't come out of thin air. It grew from the Nordic project titled An Inclusive Arts Sector in the Nordics. The structure allowed Norway to take evidence seriously. So since 2021, 3 major studies have been commissioned. 1, a national mapping of diversity work in the arts and culture sector. The other, a focused look at Sami arts and culture, and research on accessible artistry and what helps or hinders differently abled artists' careers. But the real cornerstone of Norway's work is reconciliation. In June 2023, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its report on historical injustices towards Sami people. The government and parliament are now following up. Of course, not as a symbolic act, but as a long-term commitment to integrate reconciliation into the heart of cultural diversity. Norway, the integration gap. Norway has laid the groundwork, as I just mentioned, the mandate, the structure, and the evidence, but now comes the hardest part, policy and practice integration. I have a few questions. The first one is, how do you weave the findings of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission into every corner of cultural policy, from museum curation to funding systems, education, and staffing? This is what I'd call the integration gap, the space between political will and institutional change. I have a reflection question, and I think actually we can take a few seconds to think about it. And the reflection question is, as you can see on the screen, how can cultural institutions ensure their work truly supports Norway's reconciliation process instead of treating it as a side project, as we are all together in this? I'll pause for 30 seconds so that you can reflect on this, and then I'll move to Sweden. Now we move to Sweden, to Stockholm, where structure and precision define the national approach. We do have detailed rights, national goals, and the artistic freedom debate. Sweden's cultural policy is built around a clear rights-based framework, and here's how it plays out. Gender equality goals that guide the Arts Council strategy through 2025, accessibility and disability rights through accessible cultural life, children's rights to culture, and the LGBTQI+ rights through Proud and Safe, published in January 2025. It's a remarkably comprehensive model, but it also opened a deep debate about something fundamental: artistic freedom. The 2021 report, Så fri är konsten, How Free is the Art, I hope I actually pronounced it well, asked whether diversity requirements in public might unintentionally limit freedom of expression. The reaction was intense. Some warned that a guided cultural life soon becomes a guided thought life. It's a sharp reminder. Even when intentions are noble, the balance between equity and artistic independence is delicate. And yes, Sweden again, and the tension gap. Let's see what the tension gap is. Sweden exposes what we can call the tension gap, the fragile balance between equality policy and creative autonomy. And our next reflection question here is, how do we strengthen diversity without making artists feel their independence is at risk? Maybe 30 seconds on this, and then we'll fly to Estonia. Crisis agility and accessibility gap. Okay, let's head east to Tallinn, to Estonia, a country that's shown impressive agility in times of crisis, but also faces the reality of limited resources. Estonia's system includes permanent co-creation platforms like the Cultural Council of National Minorities and the Ida-Viru Roundtable, which feed community input directly into national policy. When the war in Ukraine began, these structures became vital. Through the Settle in Estonia program, temporary protection holders received free adaptation training and language courses. Museums opened their doors at no cost, and from 2023 to 2025, the government has funded Ukrainian language and cultural programs for young people. That's agility in action. But then comes the harder side of the story. The accessibility policy field, focusing on differently abled individuals' inclusion, is brand new and was only launched in January 2024. And it's being managed by half a position. That's right, half a position to coordinate an entire national area of work. With such constraints, the ministry is focusing on mapping institutions, building a network of accessibility coordinators, and developing a national methodology for objective accessibility indicators. The ambition is there, but the resources aren't yet catching up. I hope my voice is not making you feel like you'd like to take a nap. Looking forward, Estonia aims to build multilingual, trusted public information space and strengthen Roma mentoring and training. But right now, their biggest challenge is not willpower, it's bandwidth. So let's take a look at the resource gap. Estonia reminds us that even the best designed policy can be ineffective under the weight of insufficient resources. And the reflection question here is, what happens when ambition is high, but the resource architecture is not yet fully in place? Maybe 30 seconds here again, and then we'll land in Oulu. Mainstreaming diversity through dialogue and competence. And finally, we come to Finland, right here in Oulu. Finland's approach is deliberate and strategic. It's about mainstreaming, making diversity not a separate project, but the backbone of all cultural policy. The trajectory started in 2020 with a ministerial working group and led to the 2023 action plan, Art, Culture and Diverse Finland. The plan embeds diversity into every layer of policymaking, from funding and heritage to future strategies. It's supported by strong frameworks. The Language Policy Program 2021 through 2022 for Sami, Romani, Karelian, and sign languages. The National Roma Policy called RAMPO 2023 through 2030, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission concerning the Sami people, which is still active through 2025. But Finland's standout strength is competence building. The dialogue cards that you might have heard. Who has heard about dialogue cards here? Okay, amazing, impressive. Co-created with Taika Art Promotion Center Finland, are a great example. Over 1,000 sets were ordered by national and international organizations and even used internally by the minister staff in late 2024. Then there are the national dialogues, open conversations on complex topics like immigration, security, and trust, and the anti-racism dialogues for ministry staff held in May 2025 and continuing this autumn. All of this adds up to something powerful, cultural change from within the system itself. And that's how it should be. What about the gap in Finland? I call it the evaluation gap, and Finland, as I said, it's doing a lot right, but it's also honest about its next challenge, the evaluation gap. The question is, how do we measure the impact of these frameworks? How do we know they are changing everyday practice and not just policy language? And the reflection question here is, what changes when diversity becomes the norm, not the exception in cultural policy? 30 seconds on this question, and then I will conclude. Okay, let's take a look at the shared gaps and future action. And United in Diversity, has anyone heard that motto? United in Diversity. That's the European Union motto. It started in 2000. The first time it was used, it was in 2000. Okay, so the conclusion. What do we see when we connect the dots between Oslo to Oulu? Across the Nordic Baltic region, 3 shared gaps keep surfacing. Number 1, the knowledge gap. We all need more independent studies and clear metrics to move from assumptions to evidence. Number 2, the competence and resource gap, the gap between intention and capacity. Finland has built internal expertise, while Estonia reminds us how fragile progress can be without funding. And 3, the mainstreaming challenge. Inclusion must stop being a special project and start being the standard way we design and deliver cultural policy. Together, these gaps shape our shared agenda for the years ahead. It's shared, meaning we need to work together to overcome the challenges. And the reflection question here is, are we ready to turn frameworks into realities together through learning from each other? I'd like to invite everyone in this room to benefit from transnational learning and cross-country learning. And yes, this is the question, actually. And the closing remark. From Oslo to Oulu, the physical distance is short, as I said, but the policy distance is remarkable. What this journey shows us is very much simple. inclusion is not a finish line. It's a practice, and it's a shared one. And if we keep learning from each other, the Nordic-Baltic region can continue leading by example, providing that equality, equity, culture, and freedom can thrive together. This was a glimpse of a comparative analysis between the 4 countries. It was huge. If I was going to share all the results that I came up with, it would have taken an hour and a half, and I'm quite sure it was out of your patience. So I just picked the most significant ones and I shared it with you. I hope it helps, and I hope actually we together work to overcome the challenges that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sajad. Thank you so much. Thank you once again. Now, our next up is our second keynote. Why true democracy needs everyone. This will be presented by Seida Berg Söderblom. She's a senior project manager and researcher at Trans Europe Halles, European Network of Grassroots Cultural Centers in Lund, Sweden. Welcome up to the stage, and please give a short description of yourself.
Good morning. My name is Seida Berg Söderblom, and I'm a white woman with dark brown hair. And today I'm wearing black jacket, dark gray pants, and my glasses to be able to read, and little bit colorful scarf on around my neck. So once again, good morning. It is profound privilege to be in this space, surrounded by familiar faces and the ones that I hope to get to know. We are united here, not just as colleagues, but as a community of concerned souls, bound by an idealistic commitment. We are dedicated guardians of humanistic values, the passionate defenders of the arts and culture as an essential public good. Thank you, Sajad, for setting the ground for my intervention. I also extend my sincere thanks for the organizers for providing this forum to reflect critically on how we are positioning ourselves today in relation to diversity in arts and culture. And I want to expand on the context in which we live and on the essential representation and agency of each individual. In light of what Sajad has shared and the reflective questions he posed, and the reality we wake up to every day, where basic human rights, human dignity, and the values we cultural workers uphold are being systematically eroded, I found myself gripped by a question. How do we even begin to articulate the fundamental role of diversity work? Diversity is not a peripheral asset. It is the core operating system. It is not a decorative layer on the top of arts and culture. It's the vital, evolving ecosystem itself. It is, quite simply, the architecture of society we live in. Diversity is about ensuring that everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from, has the unquestionable right to participate, belong, shape the future. Without this, our democracy is dangerously undermined, our culture is narrow, and our social fabric is tragically weakened. When I reflected on my experiences, my work, and the tireless effort of so many, you, individually and collectively put, I felt for the first time a deep despair at the enormity of the challenges we face. I felt the pain of knowing that my capabilities were not enough to stop genocide in Gaza, not enough to reverse enormous budget cuts, not enough to uproot the racism ingrained in Finland's highest political seats, not enough to dismantle the far-right narratives poisoning our democracies. And yet, at the bottom of that despair, when my voice felt like a whisper against the storm, I found the light, not in an individual answer, but within the deep wisdom and courageous energy of the collective. That courage is in this room today, and I believed in it for 25 years as a cultural worker. So today, with this conviction and dedication, I want to speak about why true democracy needs everyone. For me, diversity work, the orchestrated efforts we put into dismantling discriminatory structures is, as Sarah Ahmed so sharply puts it, the work we do when we attempt to transform an institution. It is the work we do when we fundamentally refuse to fully inhabit the norms of that institution. Today, diversity work is nothing less than defending the very foundation of democracy. This work has never been more urgent as the current structures have failed. They fail to provide equal opportunities to underrepresented minorities, particularly foreign-born artists and cultural workers, in employment, funding, and professional growth. People are still marginalized, discriminated against, and targeted for the color of their skin, their ethnic background, their nationality, abilities, gender identity, sexual orientation, or belief. Every detail of our identities, the very ornaments that makes us human, is being weaponized as a tool of exclusion, a justification for racism, ethnic profiling, and dehumanization. When we speak of democracy, we often speak of elections, institutions, and laws. Yet, democracy means much more than that alone. At its core, democracy is the living promise that every voice matters, that no one is invisible, and no one is left behind. The year 2025 marks Finland and Åland's co-presidency of the Nordic Council of Ministers, a term committed to a strong and united Nordic region. The Nordic Councils of Ministers has articulated a bold vision to become the world's most sustainable and integrated region by 2030. We must acknowledge without hesitation this vision will remain merely an aspiration until we place the full spectrum of diverse voices at the undisputed foundation of our democratic life. Diversity is not about ticking boxes. It is about real power, representation, and belonging. It is about fundamentally re-engineering who holds the power. It is about building societies where different cultures, backgrounds, ages, abilities, and experiences are leveraged as our most potent resource. It means ensuring our youth has a voice in shaping their own future, ensuring equal power across all genders, enabling potential of newcomers, and making certain that every resident feels an unconditional sense of belonging where they choose to live. Diversity is a mandate for intersectional sustainability. We must remember that it is not only the environment that needs protection, but also the social fabric that binds us together. That fabric is strongest when woven from the threads as diverse as communities it unites. Diversity is the key to an egalitarian system, and it is the only thing that safeguards democratic resilience. We live in a time of disinformation and growing mistrust in institutions. A society that values and protects diversity is stronger, more cohesive, and better prepared to resist division. Furthermore, freedom of expression and cultural diversity are non-negotiable democratic rights. When artists, journalists, and civil society speak with many voices, democracy thrives. When their voices are silenced or narrowed to just one narrative, democracy fails. Protecting diversity means protecting pluralism, the very lifeblood of our democratic system. Diversity deepens and enriches our collective identities and values. Arts and culture, as public good, embody the essence of Europe and the spirit of its democracy. When people see themselves reflected in the cultural and political life of their communities, they experience a true sense of belonging. And it is this sense of belonging that builds the trust on which democracy itself depends. Crucially, diversity is the engine of imagination and innovation. The greatest threat to democracy today is not only external pressures, but the shrinking of our collective political imagination. It is the bold presence of diverse voices, especially in arts and culture, that dares us to envision new features, sparks inventive solutions, and keeps democracy alive and dynamic. So let us be clear. Democracy without diversity is fragile, exclusive, and uninspired. But democracy through diversity is strong, inclusive, and full of possibility. Protecting diversity is not just cultural policy. It is the very essence of defending democracy itself through the actions. This principle becomes clear when we look at how diversity informs our commitments across society. When we speak of gender equality, we declare that true democracy cannot exist when the world is confined to binary divisions or where individuals are denied the freedom to define and live their own gender identities. When we listen to children and young people, let them thrive in an inclusive environment, we secure the future of our democracy. When we stand for human rights, rights of people with disabilities, and the rule of law, we defend the principle that diversity is not a challenge, but the greatest guarantee of democracy. When we commit to inclusion, equality, and equity, we declare that democracy does not belong to the majority alone, but to all of us on equitable terms without compromise. When we pursue cooperation, nurture belonging for everyone, we demonstrate that our strength lies not in sameness, but in unity across difference. And when we do all this, we prove that diversity is the only viable blueprint for democracy's survival. Let's anchor this in our reality. At the end of 2024, more than 1 in 10 people in Finland spoke a native language other than Finnish, Swedish, or Sami. In Sweden, that number is 1 in 5. And yet, when we look at the leadership, the funding decisions, and the power positions in our cultural institutions, we confront a systemic inequity that cannot be ignored. True democracy and democratic participation is impossible when the very people who make up our societies are not represented in the spaces that define our shared identity. The gaps in representation, the persistent inequalities, and the discriminatory structures are not abstract problems. They are lived realities for countless individuals, for artists, cultural workers, and people whose voices are sidelined every day. This is not abstract theory. It is the lived reality that I, along with countless colleagues, face every day as we work to create, participate in, and shape the cultural landscape of the Nordics. Therefore, I stand before you to confront one of the most pressing obstacles to progress in our societies, the declining belief in democracy. The only way to overcome this, I believe, is to unlearn, to challenge our unconscious biases, mindsets, and the attitudes that maintain structural discrimination and hold us back from becoming true agents of transformation. We must place diverse voices at the heart of securing democracy, the cornerstone of Nordic societies, ensuring that they guide every choice we make. Today, in a world that is polarizing, closing in, and contaminated by far-right narratives and border violence, we find ourselves in a situation not unlike that of 100 years ago. A universal enemy is being declared, the immigrants. Highly skilled individuals with multiple degrees, languages, and the desire to build a better society are framed as a threat. I'm a transborder cultural professional, rooted in Mediterranean heritage, shaped by multiple migration stories. I'm committed to post-national knowledge and power, and the pursuit of social, environmental, and democratic justice. I am an immigrant in 2 countries, Finland and Sweden. I'm a child of cosmopolitan family where 4 cultures converge. I speak not only for myself, on behalf of every colleague in this room and outside, whose migration story shapes their work, knowledge, and perspective, and bringing a unique outlook to the world around us. Together with those whose tireless efforts are shaping the future of art in the Nordics, across EU and beyond, let me say this with absolute clarity. We are not the enemy. The immigrants are not the enemy. The real enemy of society, common good, and democracy is racism, hate speech, normalization of political narratives that politicize migration, and the systems and structures that allow and spread these narratives. If we are to confront this real enemy, we must not only reject what divides us, but also envision what unites us. We need a language and a practice that goes beyond actions, a language of hope, justice, and radical transformation. Let us turn to that language of transformation. To close, I wish to share a passage from the Manifesto of Change. Thank you. Co-written by the brilliant artists and agents of change of the cultural transformation movement. Dunya, Mira, Eli, Emmanuel, Ksenia, Farila, and Laura. Together with my partners in Austria, Belgium, Italy, Ukraine, and Sweden, we are working to reshape cultural institutions so that they reflect the full spectrum of backgrounds and perspectives present in our societies today. Our work requires moving beyond questions of artistic output and audience diversity towards ensuring that leadership, governance structures, and staffing within arts and cultural organizations mirror the communities they serve. I would like to share this co-written poetry with you now, not because poetry is one of the most powerful ways of meaning-making, not because it offers refuge when we are surrounded by empty words, because it is an enchanting act of resistance we must embody. We dream of a world where silent stories are heard and valued, vulnerabilities become strengths, and love not success, defines our lives. We refuse to conform with injustice. We refuse to accept lies. We will repair, restore, rebuild. We demand stop the violence, start the rooting, dismantling of oppressive systems, a planet-first approach, care for all beings, slow down to protect. This is a manifesto for those who dream of a better world, for anyone seeking to transform injustice into care in cultural sector, and disconnection into solidarity, and stagnation into creativity. If you have felt the urge to act but didn't know where to begin, let this be your invitation. Take this invitation. Take this call to repair, restore, and rebuild. This courage we need is already here, in this room, in this collective, in this vision. Let us begin our discussion today by showing that diversity is the heartbeat of democracy, and true democracy needs everyone. This is the only meaningful future we must invest in. Thank you.
Thank you, Seda. Thank you so much. Before we move on, just a quick reminder. If you need to stand up and move around a bit, you are welcome to do so. It might be a long time sitting around, but please stretch and move a bit. So, next up, we will have a panel discussion. Okay, so I think maybe you have some bags in front of you, and inside your bags you will find a notepad and pen. Okay, so now I will ask you kindly to sit down. Okay, so in your seminar bags, excuse me. Okay, can everybody hear me all right? Yes, in your seminar bags, you will find a notepad and pen. Thank you, thank you. So, nice and calm. We will now move on to the panel discussion. In your seminar bags, you will find a notepad and pen, because the panel will follow by a Q&A session. So you can write down your questions or comments and pass them to Aleksi, who is wearing a blue shirt. And during the Q&A, Aleksi will read them out loud. And you may also ask questions for Sajad and Seda. The panel discussions bring in perspectives from across the Nordic-Baltic region to provide a multi-voiced reality check. How do the keynotes observations resonate in their contexts? And what perspectives might be missing? What does diversity work look like from their points of view? The panel is moderated by Ninos Josef, who is a consultant and development strategist from Sweden. And I kindly ask the panelists to also begin with a brief visual self-description and share your pronouns, please. Welcome.
Eihän tällä nyt ole.
Three? Oh my God. Okay. I feel like is this thing on? Yeah, okay. I feel like Britney Spears, you know? I'm gonna pass these on at least in the beginning so you guys can have them in your hands already so we don't need to struggle with that later. All right, okay. Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Ninos Youssef. I'm of Aramean and Assyrian descent. If you don't know what that is, I would advise you to look it up. It's not Armenian and it's not Syrian, but it's indigenous to the Levant. I'm born and raised in Sweden. I work as a professional dancer and actor, and as well as a development strategist, mainly focused on diversity and cultural policy. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm wearing dark green pants, a black piqué or polo, and I have these like bleached blonde hair because I'm doing Gatsby at the State Theater right now. So it's not because I chose this hair color myself, but because work forced me to. And I think, I mean, you got a short introduction, but I think we're gonna just pass it on and I'll have you guys introduce yourselves because I feel like that would be the most accurate, and we'll start all the way over there with Liba.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Liba Bērziņa. I'm from Latvia, and my pronouns is she, her. And today I'm wearing a colorful dress with flower motifs in pink and red color, dark green jacket. I have dark blue trousers and brown boots, and I'm sitting in a wheelchair with a white frame. I always forget to tell that I'm in a wheelchair because I don't think about it on a daily basis, right? And I say shortly about who am I, right? I come from Latvia, and I call myself inclusive culture promoter. And I always say I try to promote inclusive culture in my country because I say I try because it's very easy and slow process. But anyway, I'm more of a freelance-based, and I do different art projects, basically, mostly in contemporary art. But I work with all kinds of people with disabilities and really try to promote inclusive culture in Latvia. And then I hope I will have a possibility to tell more how it is really in Latvia and why it's slow. It's very shortly, if it's enough.
It's perfect. We'll get into it more. We can continue with Isabel.
I don't know. Is this, yeah. Boris Kaika, hello everyone. My name is Isabel Nordlund, and I am wearing a gabete from the Luleå Sami area, a traditional Sami clothing from the Luleå Sami area. And I am from the Swedish side of Sápmi. I also wear a solopo, jewelry here on my chest that is very important for me. And I work as an advisor on the culture unit at Sami Council, which is an NGO that works for our member organizations in Sweden, Finland, and Norway, and also previously Russia.
Hello, my name is Grażyna Slushko. I'm from Lithuania. Although I'm not ethnic Lithuanian, I belong to Polish national minority. My pronoun is she, her, and today I'm wearing short black dress and long black boots. And I work for the governmental institution, which is called Department of National Minorities. and the institution is responsible for the preservation of culture of national minorities, and I'm mainly focused on Roma minority.
Good morning. My name is Elham Fakuri, and I'm coming from Iceland, but I'm originally Persian. My pronoun is she, her, and today I am wearing a white shirt with embroidery with roosters and apple trees, and green pants with red socks, and I have black curly hair. And I'm working at Nordic House in Iceland, Reykjavik, and I'm working with artistic programs there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa Bittner-Gibbs. I am coming from Åland, but before that, Sweden, and before that, Pennsylvania in the United States. Today, I am wearing a fall shirt with gold and rust and sienna type colors, a black blazer, vegan leather skirt, and boots. And my pronouns are she and her. I have the pleasure to be here in a few different capacities, but I believe mainly because I am the vice chair of the Nordic Migrant Expert Forum of the Nordic Council. I also, until very recently, served as vice chair for the Council for Integration for the Åland Islands. I also, in addition to this, currently chair the largest civil society organization on the Åland Islands, Ålands Natur och Miljö. Which is an environmental NGO. So my main activities are within the field of sustainability. More increasingly have I started to make more moves from social sustainability towards questions around existential sustainability and cultural sustainability. And my main work that I recently finished at the government of Åland centers around human flourishing.
You can keep that. I have this Britney mic on. All right, thank you guys for joining. I just also want to say that we had Ilan Kwak from Greenland who could not join us because of flight problems, because of the weather. So there would be another person in this panel, but will survive anyways. I also want to stress out, like I've told the panelists before when we've communicated, that I myself was a part of a group called, or a network called Critical Friends, which I will explain a bit more later on, that worked with diversity and inclusion in the Nordic countries, mainly focusing under the Nordic Council of Ministers during the Norwegian presidency. And what we found out quite early on in our work is that every time we meet in these kind of settings where this is the topic, usually the conversations become a bit hostile. And so I had promised myself and promised the panel that we're going to try to focus on visionary utopias rather than dwelling into the past and try to pinpoint or point at people and institutions for their wrongdoings, and instead imagining a future and try to, discuss how we get to that utopian future instead. Because it's very easy to dwell into historical aspects of it, which is really important. So we will probably bring that into perspective as well in this conversation. But I believe all of us are here as we aim to move forward rather than looking backwards. So I just want to clarify that so you don't expect this to be a heated debate where we're like, throwing shade at each other, because we won't. I want to start off by give a short explanation of Critical Friends, which is, or it used to be, today it's a bit different, but it used to be a network of artists and cultural professionals with Black, Brown, Indigenous, and multicultural backgrounds across the Nordic regions. And this group consisted of literally representation from what we considered a Nordic country or a Nordic state or a Nordic independent sovereignty. So we were 8 people from all of the different, from the whole region. This steering committee was set up as a part of the broader 3-year project, An Inclusive Cultural Sector in the Nordics, which spanned from 2017 to 2019 and ended with a big conference just before the pandemic struck us all. and it was run by the Norwegian presidency at the Nordic Council of Ministers. This network served to provide critical frameworks for Nordic art and cultural institutions and organizations on all levels, so all the way up to the decision makers and policy makers down to the grassroots independent organizations, as well as focusing on developing methods and tools for implementations of diversity and inclusion within education, funding and resources, representation and accessibility, and mainly focused on ethnical diversity. And this basically ended in a list and series of documented recommendations, which you can find at the Norwegian Arts Council website, Kulturdirektoriet, I think you pronounce it in Norwegian, as well as in a anthology and a publication, which thanks to Keme and Taike, you can actually find right there. Anna is bringing it up. It's called Actualize Utopia, which basically gives you the tool to actualize our utopia, to be frank. It's that easy. It's 10 different authors giving their strategies and recommendations on how to work with ethnic diversity and inclusion in the Nordic arts field. And it highlights the racial barriers that were existing back then and that unfortunately are still existing. I also want to add on that we're going to reference the 2 keynotes that we just heard, and we're going to be discussing some of the topics that were brought up there. But I first want to bring in a bigger question, which is 5 years ago when we ended the Critical Friends Network and the project that the Norwegian presidency had, we had already discussed why are we still here? And like a decade later or 15 years later, why are we still discussing these topics and questions and issues? And it's 2025, which is, I want to say 5 years, but it's basically 6 years later even. And I want the panel to take around and answer the questions. Why do you think we're still here discussing this? We can start over with Liva over there in the corner.
Only jokes come to my mind, like, so we have a job to do, you know, and etc. But I also think a lot about like why we still talk about these basic human rights and the basic stuff of humanity, and so. But I, of course, don't have an answer. But anyway, what I see in my daily practice, the change happens very slow. And we are still in own bubbles, in different bubbles, disconnected from other bubbles, and that's what I try to do, to break these bubbles, you know, just to bring people in one space, in one room, so they can meet. But it happens very slowly. So, and as I'm impatient, I also I don't like it very much. But I just accepted it's the way how it is. And yeah, just I'm continuing to do these small steps. That's what we all do. I believe it's the only thing we can do. So just digging and digging and digging. Yeah, that is how I can explain it.
Isabel?
Yeah, my jokes also come to my mind. No, I think it was very nice what Seida, one of the keynote speakers, said, when my voice felt like a whisper against the storm, because that is how I feel sometimes, that we are like talking about this all over. But I also think that we should have this positive outlook, because I feel that for us, on the Sami Council and indigenous peoples around the world, we can see that there is an increased interest in Sami culture, and people want to have us in different rooms. And of course, that is also quite a problem sometimes, because we can see that our culture is misused, for example, which leads that the worth of the Sami culture isn't brought back to the Sami society. And also that we can see that there is increasing of stereotypes of what Sami culture is and what Sami people. So there are also a lot of diversity and minorities in the Sami society as well.
As I mentioned, I work on Roma issues, so I'd like to say some words also about the Roma minority, because I think that in our societies, especially in the Baltic area, it's the minorities is mostly marginalized. And if you look at our Baltic Nordic region, Roma national minority is a very small minority in comparison with the Central Europe. The biggest community lives in Sweden, could be around 100,000 people, and the smallest in Estonia with a 600 person. And I think the main problem that it's not problem, but it's historical minority, but we still do not know the history of this minority. We still do not realize why this minority is so marginalized. For example, Spain this year celebrates 600 years. They declared this year the year of Spanish Gitanos. And it marks 600 years since the Roma arrived to Spain. And maybe in our societies, it also would be good to know when the Roma arrived and to maybe dedicate some measures for Roma culture. The second thing why we are at the same place, still standing with the Roma culture, I think that there are a lot of stereotypes about Roma culture. And usually we think that the Roma culture is just Roma singing and dancing themselves. And we think that sometimes we think that they're just for entertainment. But the Roma culture is not, they have a big heritage, and I think that the inclusion, involvement of the cultural institution is not enough at this place, because several years ago, European Institute for Roma Arts and Culture based in Berlin, they did a mapping of different museums, and they found out that there are a lot of objects in museums connected with Roma, but usually they are not on the expositions. Or if they are on the expositions, so mainly Roma presented as others. And so I think that's the main problems. And the last thing which I would like to outline, that we should, when we do something for Roma, we need to think that nothing about Roma without Roma. We need to include them and to make space not to tell something for them, but also to be heard.
Well, I think I agree with others that change is happening, but it's very slowly, and there are good outcomes are happening almost like compared to 5 years ago. Definitely there have been changes, at least in Iceland that I'm coming from. But I think the reason that we are still here is because, like Sajjad, I think, said in his presentation, sometimes there are exceptions. Like if we do some important things, diversity things, it's usually just exception and not a norm. And I think it should become a norm and a structural, not exceptional. I think that's one big step that we can have, and also just probably acknowledge the injustice and unfairness that is happening, because if we don't acknowledge that in the first place, we cannot change anything. So I think acknowledgement is also really important step probably for us, but yeah.
I'm educated as a political scientist, so obviously the first lens that I go for is power. The reason why we're still in the place that we are is that we've built a system that benefits from sameness. So the reality is the people who occupy the positions of power to change generally have benefited from our current status quo. That's just simple facts. It's structural. Well, and the thing about it is that recognizing that it is not equal, it is not diverse, it gives oxygen to the idea that things have to change. And of course, that puts pressure on people who are in power. But radical change is not in their interest. So that's a lot of the reason why we see very basic, let's have this many cultural exhibitions that are of this, they'll throw crumbs to make it seem like, well, we're doing something about it, or we're doing enough about it. So the reality is that we have to examine, and I think this is particularly pronounced in the Nordic countries where conformity and sameness and not sticking out have been pretty big cultural values. That has to change. We have to stop rewarding sameness and conformity.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I also want to circle back and ask another question. Do you, which is just a simple yes or no question, do you believe that this slow-paced change is happening because of lack of interest from policymakers?
Yes.
But I think no, or somewhere in the middle maybe, because it's just nature. You know, it's just how it is, and we just cannot force things sometimes. And yeah, I'm into really accepting it as it's just the way of how things happen. For example, in Latvia, I see that people don't like change in general, no matter good or bad. And it's crazy sometimes. Sometimes changes are good and people are against. Like, it does not make sense for me. But anyway, it's kind of natural process of, yeah.
The thing about politics is it tends to be oriented around election cycles, which means short-term, visible gains. Right? Changing a culture takes decades, generations. And so people, generally speaking, want to focus on those short-term wins. You are right that to a degree it is human nature. We're comfortable with the things we know and the things that look like us. But the reality is as our wonderful keynote speaker spoke before us, with the growing narratives of the far right that make immigration, difference, even the second language of this country or Sami, these are under threat, even though they're prescribed in law. The more oxygen those narratives get, the more people feel like, okay, well, I can lean into this fact that I just want things to look the way they look and have always looked.
Yeah, we talked about, Sadi mentioned something about diversity or like this exceptions that we usually celebrate when something is. I'm personally born and raised in Sweden to immigrant parents. I was raised in what we call the no-go zones and had this journey that is, you know, like almost a Billy Elliot movie of like from the ghetto to the Royal Opera houses and theaters around the world. And what I've realized is, like, looking back now, I'm 36 years old, I'm realizing there is no new Ninos coming up. So in 36 years, in my opinion, at least in my country, change has taken a bit too long. And I'm more on the radical side of, like, if you sit on power, for example, during my appointment at the National Arts Grants Committee's board by the government, I realized, like, I'm sitting with direct power in my hands. If I want to make the change, the power is in my hands right now. I can postpone it and say, oh, but this is going to take a while, and let's do it next time around. But then if I'm sitting with the power, which a lot of you guys in this room that are listening right now do, change happens when you sit on the power in the immediate effect. Like, the more you postpone it, the longer it's going to take. And the longer marginalized people will actually be hurt from it and will suffer from it. So to also have this idea of change taking time is also a myth, I believe. Just like Alyssa said, it's a political myth because change doesn't need to take time. If you want to change your clothes, it takes 30 seconds, you know? So change can... If you want to dye your hair like I had to do, it takes an hour, you know? And if you sit with direct power, change can happen immediately. And I want to circle back to Isabel because you bring in a very important perspective, the Sami perspective. And I want to, if you could maybe explain a bit of like the differences in how the Sami minority and indigenous Sami minority is being treated in terms of policy making, if you know, like the difference between Finland, Norway, and Sweden. I think that would be a great thing for the audience to hear about.
So the Sami community, Sápmi or Sami Etnami, Julusami, it's divided in 4 countries. It's Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Russia. And we are very concerned about the Sami cultural workers on the Russian side, because after the pandemic and of course the war, we don't have any contact with the Sami culture workers on the Russian side, and we are very, very concerned about that. But it is very complex because the national state are actually affecting our culture. And we talked about artistic freedom, and some of the keynote speakers also talk about artistic freedom. But the Sami society is wondering, is it really the Sami society who are affecting our culture, or is it the majority society? Because the national state, we have to adapt to each national state and also each culture support in each country, for example. So we can actually see that the national state borders are dividing us.
Yeah, because I was also thinking of how Sami artists have different foundations depending on which country they're actually divided in today's contemporary world, and how that can affect the artistic freedom and the artistic expression of someone who is collectively a group, but that is divided within different nation borders and have to adapt to different nation laws and rules that applies to them. I also want to circle back to Liba a bit and ask you of in terms of accessibility, when we talk about diverse accessibility, what would be your utopia?
This utopia topic or theme, because I always talk also about it, because I wouldn't do what I do if I wouldn't believe in utopia. I really believe that it's possible. And I think in a perfect world, just everything is accessible to everyone, so people can freely, choose what they want to be or what they want to do. At least they have a possibility to try, Because in my daily work also, sometimes culture workers ask, but do all people with disabilities want everything to be accessible, Like for sure they want, or do they want to be included? I mean, they need to have a choice to be included or not, but everything should be, freely accessible. And it's also a lot about this attitude and creating this, safe space or this unconditional love space where everyone is accepted. They can be just themselves, even though if they can't participate like fully, if they are just there, it's enough, And we've managed to create these environments during some workshops or master classes in Latvia. And it was just magic, all diverse people coming together, being in one space, and everyone had their own, free space to be themselves, who they are, even though they are just there lying or running around or screaming, whatever. And I really felt like we built a perfect society, within, 1-2 days. And then again, there was this big question: why don't we live on a daily basis like this? If it's possible to see, like it is possible, And then a lot of other questions come up, like why and why it's not on our daily basis, but it's possible. It's more than clear. So we should bring these small tries and apply to bigger society, It sounds very simple, I know, but it's not, as we just discussed, right?
Yeah. Also to Gracina, I want to ask, what is the difference, because you're focused on the Roma minority, what is the difference in implementing diversity work when it comes to national minorities in relation or in comparison to ethnic minorities or ethnic diversity, for example, or accessibility?
Yes, in Lithuania we have a lot different national minorities. The biggest minority is Polish, the second is Russian, Belarusian. But if to compare work with those minorities and work with the Roma, so I think the main obstacle when we work with Roma is anti-Gypsyism, is the special form of racism against Roma. Yeah. And it's because other minorities, they do not feel such, intolerance towards them. but Roma, they feel the intolerance. Sometimes they are dehumanized, and I think it's the main difference. And if you ask me about my utopia, so I would say that my utopia, if anti-Gypsyism would disappear somehow.
All right. Elham, I want to ask you, connecting to one of the quotes that was said earlier, what changes when diversity becomes the norm, and especially in cultural policy and not the exception? How do you think that would change the world or our society today if that would be the norm?
So because sometimes like what I'm really interested in is that to look at art and cultural institutions not just as art institutions but as like a platform for social change, and I believe really that it would actually have some totally have big changes in the society. So when the diversity and inclusion is actually part of the practice and is not just like a checking some boxes, it would definitely bring the society closer, and also, by closer, I'm not talking about the cliche and stereotype that, oh, let's be close together, but actually it happens, and also it's a way to democracy, of course. And but also, like I mentioned before, for that we of course need to acknowledge that the whole injustice, and also just it's something also interesting came to my mind because also I saw it on the article or essay that you shared with us about the non-Western practices, and this is also a very interesting point of that how we can get there because. For instance, I think at least me living in Iceland, I feel everything is basically measured by European standards, like all the statics, all the programming, all art funding, everything that we basically teach or learn in schools. And for getting to that point, also to the point to become more diverse or inclusive, also is something that we kind of decolonize this mindset of European culture, that it's the only standards and it's the only like a goal set that we want to get there, kind of. So I believe when we get to that point, then people actually can all become, they can feel belonging, which is the most important thing for you to live in a society, to feel that you actually belong to this society and you are just not like an outsider and the other.
So for decades, I can quickly explain, for decades, I would say for years or throughout most of history, Western or European standards have been what is considered the universal idea of perfection in the arts and culture. However, I feel like that is, I don't want to say slowly changing, but it's drastically erupting something from underneath in terms of like in relationship to globalization and the digital tools that the newer generations have access to, where they can find and basically look for more information when it comes to indigenous groups. They can scroll on TikTok and all of a sudden they see how Inuit people eat or how, you know, and all of these things. So in a utopian world, as great as globalization and digitalization can be, perhaps that can also be a tool to somewhat disrupt this idea that the European or the Western world is the universal idea of perfection when it comes to arts. I want to circle back to what Ilham said also earlier, because you talked shortly about representation. I think this is a question Alyssa can start answering, and then we can take everybody on the round. But when it comes to representation, when representation instead becomes tokenism or an exclusion, as a lot of people today see representation as a great tool of diversification. But yesterday we also heard Julian say that, well, sometimes representation can actually become really difficult and quite put people in a target instead. And so how do you cross-connect between representation / tokenism and the consequences that can erupt from that?
Well, I think right now the issue with governance is that we need to move from managing differences and we need to start enabling our mutual visibility. So as a general guiding principle, and it shouldn't be about, do we have this many number of this, that, and the other? It has to be about building infrastructure that makes us all more visible, period. Because the human race and human existence is incredibly complex and nuanced. And I think that sometimes when we get into this very checklist-itis, we forget about things like intersectionality. Like one of the things that I absolutely love about this seminar today is this live text going on, because I'm ADHD as well, not that I mentioned that. One of the other things that I think was really wisely brought up before in the keynotes was about metrics. We measure things like intercultural, I believe it was mentioned at last night's dinner, how many people will attend, and we have this amount of funding, and we need to fund the culture that people will come and see. But what about other metrics? For example, maybe instead of focusing on things like attendance, we focus about what came out of this cultural exhibition. How many people made a new friend? How many people connected? How many other great new ideas or exhibitions did that lead to? Do we notice that there is more meaning in society? Do we notice that there is more curiosity in society? And the question really comes down to, well, how the heck would you measure that? The reality is we do quantitative measurements entirely too much. In the Nordics, we need to start moving towards more qualitative forms of research, which, yes, do require more effort and time, but they're the ones that really get at the depth of human meaning and identity and what it means to be on this planet.
Anybody who would like to add anything to?
My mind comes these different levels of participation. How can we involve people? And then there are these, first steps when they are maybe sometimes as a, just there or because of the checkbox, right? So we have this quantitative data or signatures in the project and etc. from practical side of the project. But then there are these higher or deeper levels that there is this equal involvement. And I really believe in this co-creation, that if we are equally involved, we do things together, we create things together, we do art together, we work together, because in Latvia, for example, people with disabilities, 73% of people with disabilities are not working, like they are unemployed. So if we just come together and work on this co-creation level, then I think it will be more meaningful involvement.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's very good that it is representation and that it is visible. But also I believe that for me as a Sami woman, when I am representing, I should represent all of the Sami culture and all of the different languages and area traditions. And like I talked before, it is a minority and it's diversity in the Sami community as well. So I'm not the answer on everything. And I think that is like very important that you actually see beyond. And in the Sami culture, the art or the definition of art is not an isolated phenomena. It is more than that. For us, culture is art, but it could also be music, or it could be the relation to land. So for us, the definition of culture should be broader, and I wish that could also be understood in the majority society.
In Lithuania, Roma population is very small. It's just 2,500. So when we speak about the representation and inclusion of Roma, it's actually not difficult for us at the governmental institution to include all active Roma and to consult them. But actually, I think that Finland has one of the best example how to include and to consult Roma, and it's the national Roma councils at the national level, but also at the local level. And as far as I know, it's almost 80 years of this kind of the consultation.
I think there is like a really like a thin line between representation and tokenism, of course, and sometimes it's very hard to realize which one is which one. And I also believe that even like institutions, when they want to like basically in a process of recruitment, it's even hard for them sometimes because with the whole diversity practice that we have, we want to be diverse, but at the same time, it is also not always optimal to be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna get this person because they're like people of color, so I'm just gonna check the boxes, which is happening a lot, you know. And for me, sometimes I'm also questioning, sometimes like, is that really because of my quality or is it because of this question that it comes up? So I think to avoid this, I think one of the most important thing is to, like you said, having the co-creation and co-production of the whole program. For instance, if you want to do a program, don't do a program and just like ask someone, like add like a person of color to just like check the boxes, but have them from the very beginning with the programming and planning and implementing the whole situation in the first place.
Sorry, there was a 5-minute sign there. I was like, my heart skipped for a second. I was like, no, I have more. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to tokenism and representation, I would say it's 2025, almost 2026. At this point, there is not really any excuse to have to tokenize people of color or people of disabilities or people of national minorities, because if you look for the quality, it is there. By this point, we've been here in generations. So to pretend that you have to tokenize and just tick some boxes, it's probably just for your own convenience. And I would say it's because we're here, most of us are all educated, we probably have quite a lot more experience than the majority of the people sitting in power positions, etc. So you don't really need to look for us that much. And by us, I mean literally us, all of us here, and plenty of you guys also out there. I want to. There are two really good questions I want to take, but I'm gonna try to, because we're talking about representation. We talked about digitalization, globalization, and like how things are going very fast, and you know the accessibility of representation. But that can also come with a price tag. Like if you look at the U.S., for example, how queer people have been, and especially trans people have been starting to be very much represented lately the past couple of 2-3 years, and then all of a sudden they see all of their rights being taken away because all of a sudden they are visible in society. So I also want to like discuss the question of like representation and how that can become a target of like bad consequences sometimes, the visibility of it. And is that something you fear we might see also in Europe a lot, or how do you feel when we discuss that topic? And I'm going to leave the mic open.
I can start.
Yeah.
Because I see it a lot. For instance, within the queer community, you see it a lot in the government, like right-wing government, that are like, oh, like now again, like we are having this exhibition or this work, and it's by trans people. While it's just been some, like you said, it's been just a very recent thing that you actually start to see them, or like a very clear example is, for instance, Netflix shows that they're like, oh, Netflix or Disney, they are doing that a lot. Again, they're doing the woke movement, that they're having these people and that people. Why we have to see them all the time? Which is, it has been always like that, but it's like a very visible thing now, and it has this consequence. However, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but I'm just saying that it is like a very good example of how the government, right-wing governments, are always talking about that we are tired of seeing those people or something.
Anybody want to add on? I can take an example in the meantime. We had this summer actually, we had an ice cream ad in Sweden that showcased an interracial couple where the woman was white and the man was black, and then they had interracial kids, and there was this crazy debate of why we're showcasing white women as being submissive to a black man in advertisement, for example. It's Sia, the ice cream company, was like, well, this is just a normal couple with kids. Like, we don't understand the critiques. So it's like representation can also come with a lot of backlash.
And we could see that when there was the book fair last year in Sweden, when the Sami community was the honored guest. And we were very we are very glad that finally we can be on the stage in the fair. But then we also can see the consequence of that a lot of culture workers in the Sami field was threatened, and also that a lot of misinformation was spread. And we can see on the Swedish side of Sápmi that there is an increase about talking about Sami culture and Sami society, but that leads to very much hatred against us.
We can also think about last year's Lucia Gate. A child was chosen with darker skin, and it became this huge backlash against Folkhälsan. It was a huge controversy. It was all over everything. The family was threatened. And that's a child wearing candles and singing songs. So the threshold for people to feel threat, it's very low, because this is a system that rewards sameness and comfortability, and what we've always had. I'm not here certainly today to advocate that we need more American culture here. But I am here to advocate that what we do need more of is the foreign gaze, of what it is like to come here from an area, particularly outside the Nordics, and what that looks like when you go to the doctor, or when you go to your school, or when you walk into a store. Just basic things of what that looks like, so people maybe begin to understand the existential stakes. Because right now, what we generally talk about are things like immigration, passports, policy. We don't talk about what it actually looks and feels like. So the foreign gaze, in contrast to the male gaze colonizes. But the foreign gaze is the possibility of opening up people to maybe not only understanding the world and recognizing what it actually is here, but also, I would say on the positive side, to falling in love with it all over again. Those of us who are immigrants who have chosen to make our home here, we're here for a reason, and it is because we love it. We love many parts of it. And that's also something I think is very valuable, because I think so much with the current political atmosphere, we're at risk of taking some things for granted, and we shouldn't.
Just, wanted to add on what is the situation in Latvia, because we don't have this problem, but you don't know why. Because in general, people with disabilities are not represented in art and culture. There are no artists with disabilities in professional art. There are no professional artists in theaters, on stage, on daily basis. In culture, so we don't have this problem yet. We are a bit behind. But what happens when there are these first tries, then sometimes there is maybe too much critics, or very weird comments from society, which makes situation a bit actually even more worse, because then people with disabilities are even more scared to be on a stage or in a spotlight. So just wanted to comment.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. I hope your group discussions were inspiring. I think we had 4 different groups, and I hope you got to... Did you have a good time in your groups? Yeah? Good. Now, we have a second message number 2 for all of you. And this message is from the artist, as well as the stone, evening dress, the shirt, unnamed bundle, tic-tac-toe game, box of matches, piece of a plate, bag, I love Berlin with something inside, the flower, stack of books in different languages, wooden blue teeth, and a shovel. They thank you for participating in the Plus 12 project and hope that you enjoyed communicating with them. The artist also asked to read a short message. I brought these items with me, well, except for the shovel, the bundle, and the flower. They are inhabitants of Oulu, so that they could arrange a small exercise in tolerance and openness for us. These items may have evoked different emotional reactions and thoughts in you. A feeling of danger, awkwardness, a feeling that all this is somehow not serious, a feeling of inappropriateness, a feeling of fragility and defenselessness, a feeling that this is for someone else, not for you, or that all this is just silly. But if you took part, I hope you felt that it was not dangerous, did not require any extra effort on your part, did not take up all your time. It was quite exciting, and perhaps you felt joy from the fact that something unusual was happening. If you went with the shovel, you obviously have something to remember. This was a model of inclusion. Thank you for this shared experience, Xenia. Okay, so now the day is coming to an end, but not quite yet. It's now time for our final panel discussion. And it will be a reflection plenary by Critical Friends Finland, CFF, moderated by Keme Pelliser, who is a polydisciplinary artist and poet who also works with facilitation, education, and consultancy. So I will kindly remind you to give a short description of yourself in the beginning. So welcome.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for being still here. My name is Keme Pelliser. I'm going to stand up for a bit. I think I really need it. It is a bit late. We are tired. I'm tired at least. So I'm a 164 person, like dark hair. I'm wearing black clothes with a black vest, black trousers, shiny boots, mesh with leopard print in it. I have purple glasses on. And as you can probably tell, English is not my mother tongue. I hope you understand me. Anyways, I think I'm okay with the way that I was introduced, polydisciplinary artist, poet, work with facilitation and everything, but I think it's so difficult to introduce ourselves in these settings because we are so many more than that. I also, I'm deeply invested in caring my children and my stepmother, for example, that takes a lot of my time. Yeah, and so many more. So I would like, before we start, to tell you that this session is going to be dialogical. So it's going to happen as a discussion. I have a few questions out of our notes. And before I pass the mic to my colleagues to introduce themselves, I will give you a bit of a background of Critical Friends. Bear with me, I will read from here. So we are part of a bigger group appointed by Taike called Critical Friends Finland. We are an advisory group comprising 8 art and culture practitioners based in Finland, representing a diverse range of artistic expressions, cultural backgrounds, and personal experiences. All of that is equally important. Our mandate is to bring our expertise in areas such as cultural diversity, social sustainability, and critical issues including race, gender, accessibility, and human rights. The whole idea of Critical Friends Finland came out of the 3 years project Inclusive Cultural Life in the Nordic region, run by Kulturdirektoratet in Norway, in which a network of artists from all the Nordic countries and with a multicultural background was working towards improving, like giving constructive criticism and developing strategies for a more inclusive cultural sector. And the idea in Finland developed to have a group that will also have more expertise in issues such as accessibility, for example. I will pass now the mic to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Thank you very much. My name is Julian Ousu. I am a light-skinned black male with afro hair and corn braids, wearing all black clothes, a turtleneck, and black shoes with white soles. And I'm wearing glasses. I am, well, occupationally, I am first and foremost a dance artist and spoken word artist, and work multidisciplinarily. But maybe in this context, it's also relevant to say I used to work in Taike. I worked in Taike for 5 years as the regional artist for youth culture in our region here, Oulu, or the Oulu region, or the northern Ostrobothnia and Kainuu regions. I am also in the supervisory board of the Finnish Cultural Foundation, and I am the chair of the board of the Nordic House in Reykjavik, and I have some colleagues here from there as well. Yeah, and now I will pass the mic on.
Did we want to have some kind of question or input in the beginning, or?
Yes, we were asked to have some kind of introductory question, and mine is inspired from the first keynote of the day, knowing that we do measure a lot and we have a lot of data, but what I do know is that we measure a lot of the quantity, the amount of work being done, which is often very much, but we have very few measurements for the quality of results being produced. And that is my, not a question, but a comment for pondering.
Nice, thank you. Hey everybody, my name is Isa Hukka. I am a Helsinki-based artist. I work in CRIP art, so critical queer disability art. Yeah, I work with a lot of questions of embodiment, connection, how to build bridges. I also work critically with questions of safer space and identity politics. I could describe myself now. I'm a person with light skin, blonde buzz-cut hair, glasses, and quite a dark outfit today in the spirit of rainy Oulu. And lastly, my kind of question I want to bring in would be, this comes from noticing how my whiteness has like come up in this externalization of the diverse people out there. Maybe some people can recognize that diversity. I have in the past thought of it as, oh, the diversity somewhere. But then I have been working more recently with the question of how does diversity show up in each and every one of us? So how am I diverse? What does that mean? Yeah.
Puures, mun ammalla märhasla ivärovla nillaritniraste ja mun puhutaan tienoleis Ferranjoes. So hey everyone, my name is Ritniraste Pieski, and I just introduced myself in Sami, and I do come from Tienu River Sami area from Sápmi, from Ohtseohka region, and I do work mainly as a freelance artist. I consider myself as a storyteller, working with performing arts, drag, and that's so on. And I'm wearing all denim outfit actually today from almost from head to toe, but I am wearing a cap that is dark gray, and it has a salmon, glittery salmon, and it says "Oot sä johka tiennyt, utsukiteno." And yeah, I was thinking like, what question I want to bring today. I'm always thinking like, how much we already have. Like if we really put our egos aside and really open our eyes and see what is already there. So I think sometimes when we're talking about equity and like diversity, like seeing how much we already have when we just open our eyes. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Gaduo. I am a cultural worker. I don't even know how to introduce myself. There's always so many hats. But at the moment I would describe myself in this room, maybe a cultural worker. I'm wearing my conference outfit, so dark pants and a sweater, or what would you call it, like a woolen sweater. I am a light-skinned Black woman, and I have curly, semi-long hair tied back on a bun. And for my question for today is, I think it's a continuation of these, is what are we ready to sacrifice? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you have.
Woo!
Does it work? This doesn't work. Give me the one that works. Hello. Can you put this on the table? Yeah, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Päiviö Maurice Omwami. I am a curator and philosopher. I work as an exhibitions curator at the Finnish Museum of Photography. And I also sit on the board of Tutkijaliitto, which is an association that publishes mainly philosophical theory in Finnish, both translations and original texts. I am a light-skinned Black male. I have an afro and a mustache. I am wearing a gray sweatshirt, dark jeans, black jeans, and some pretty spacey sneakers. My question for today, maybe a point of pondering, is when it comes to equity and the work that we do, how do we move on from the level of ideation to the level of pragmatics?
Okay, thank you. So I just have a little bit more to read, and then we can jump into the discussion. Because I want you to know that we have been a sounding board for the Arts Promotion Center during the organization of this seminar. And today we were asked to be here to reflect on what was stood out or what was missing if the seminar achieved their goals. And we have been talking about how to measure things, right? So I'm wondering, why are you here today? What's your goal here today? How can we measure that? But maybe we can just jump to the measure. Yes. Isa.
Okay.
Yes. Does this work? Does it? Yes, now it works.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask you, Keme, because you said a great term in our internal discussion before. You mentioned follow-up. Can you say what you think of follow-up and this event?
Can you context more the question?
Okay, what I think you said was, correct me, what is the follow-up and how could we see it and could it be communicated better? And we do these diversity events, we gather for the information and try to make connections, right? And do this work, but where's the follow-up? This is, I guess, what you said.
I think I got it. Correct me if I didn't. Yes, because I think that I was about to read that, but I improvised. One of the goals of this gathering was also to either connect or reconnect. This is not the first seminar, conference, gathering that has happened in the last years. 6, 5, we were saying 10, 15. So, but from my point of view, I didn't see a concrete proposition to follow up on these gatherings. What is the network, the framework that gets out of it, and that we can measure somehow? So that is one question that I have. And maybe we can continue on that question. Is it today possible to start that conversation before we leave? Yes. Would you like to continue with the measurement?
Well, I can sort of follow up on that. I think
Follow up.
I understand your question completely, and I think that with sessions like these, if the purpose is mainly to network and get together and sort of share what is going on everywhere, that's all great and fine. But also maybe to then come together and sort of, as we discuss our different sort of situations and what we're trying to do to build up equity and inclusiveness, also share some kind of goals and set some kind of goals together. So the next time that we sit down or come together, we can sort of see what goals have we reached, or if we have not reached them yet, at least what has the road been like towards reaching those goals. Mm-hmm. So I think that's also for me the sort of one thing that I've been doing this work in different kind of settings for almost 10 years now. And we see a lot of seminar work around these kind of topics. But then again, we see a lot of ideation planning, and then incremental change, of course, is slow. But if we don't set clear goals, then we can gather data. We can all come up with, we have this, that, and a third. But then again, we can't really compare how we managed in a sense. So when we set clearer goals, even though we might not reach them, we still can say, okay, what did we do to try and reach the goals? What worked, what didn't, and what was the outcome?
Yeah. Just to respond a bit to that, I think that in that case, to be more specific and more transparent, so we can create some sort of shared accountability and see, okay, we did this, it worked like this, and what actions are demanding now these previous actions? Because for sure we cannot see 10 years in advance, but we can measure that. So definitely. Would you like to say something? You're very quiet.
Yeah, it can easily be like, hey, show me the data, show me the slides. I want to learn about this stuff, and I'm taking their notes down. But then, really, when it comes to the clear actions, we can read about this stuff, but really, we have to then really take the internalized racism or all the phobias we do have in each. And we were also discussing earlier how we also, when we talk about when we talk about organizations, we mean also just people. It's people. So then also doing the discomfort work in there and really taking back and seeing what is there, and that that we don't take some. Yeah, we're reading about something, but then we're really thinking, okay, how it is happening in who we are here, what it means, and also looking back on that.
And then thinking about the discomfortable work, because what do we mean by that when we're thinking about the practicals, what are we doing? Now we set some kind of goals, then we have these practical steps to do the goals. What do we sign up for? What are the things that we actually need to do? Talking about stepping back, talking about all these things. Where are we willing to sacrifice? I know that there's been a lot of discussion. This is a never-ending pie, but we do know that this is not a never-ending pie, and we have to do things that are of our discomfort. And I love how Sonja Lindfors always says, sit with that discomfort to know what is going on. So what do we actually need to do to create equity? And I'm thinking just concrete, we were talking about how Ritni Rasti just pointed out how there's the organizations and then there's the structures, and we can talk about the structures. But we need to also touch upon the people, because people are the structures, people are the organizations. who is sitting there? Who are we talking about? Who are we talking with? Who is invited? Who is not invited? Who gets to stay? Who gets to go? All these things. So like, what are we ready to sacrifice to actually become equitable?
I can add something. Yeah, I was thinking about what was mentioned earlier about the end goals and what are the aims and what we are working with. I think somebody probably in the previous panel said earlier today that change needs to happen now, even though we're not going to get ready or something. Maybe I thought it further, continue the thought further, but what I was thinking of is that when we talk about change and we're talking about diversity and we're talking about all that we're talking about here today, we're often talking about the end goals, but there are a lot of things that need to happen now. So we sort of skip the work that needs to be done now, and we're thinking about very much further. And then realize that, yes, we don't have the resources to do that work yet. So then we don't start the work that can be done now very often. Very often we sort of like push that into the future as well, even though there are many things that are already acute or are already possible to do. I was also thinking about, maybe somebody might find this to be semantic, but when we're talking about the art sector, who are we talking about? Are we talking about the artists who are doing the actual art, or are we talking about the institutions that are supporting the art that is being made? So when we're talking about diversifying, are we talking about diversifying the people who create art, or the diversifying the people who get to pick who do art, and eventually might also diversify the artist field as well? And those are two very, very different questions, I think. And tackling them as one might not necessarily be very productive.
Yeah, thank you for these comments. Super good kind of summaries. Yeah, I want to comment on what you said, Julian, about the urgency and could we say even ability to do something also now. There is so much ability and knowledge and skills, right? Tools. And yeah, could we have shared them more here? Or could we start doing it more? Let's put it that way. And I want to bring you a thought from the CRIP arts, disability arts, which is accessibility, saavutettavuus, tillgänglighet, it is collective action out of love, being constantly created, being constantly transformed, being constantly developed together. And what I find out sometimes in my work as a facilitator in disability arts is that people in institutions might feel that there is always somebody else who is coming to save the accessibility. There is a funding that is missing. There is the ramp that nobody just has time to go and get. There is the disabled consultant. Hire us though, but you know what I mean? Like there is the outer disabled consultant coming to tell us how to do access. In fact, I would say we can create more accessibility every second. And we have done so many things even today. We have multilingual communication going on here all the time. We got interpretation. We got descriptions, we got basic consideration happening, which is all great, but there's still a lot to do even with the seminar. I, for example, as a disabled person, found that a lot of things are not, I don't feel like I can participate fully because, for example, the schedule is too tight and there's too much to process all the time. So, and the physical environment sometimes as well. So many things, but we can and we are creating access all the time. How can I do it? How can we do it instead of somebody coming in to do it? And access goes for many kinds of people, not just disabled people. How can I, as a white person, create access to discussions, these spaces that is, for example, not like hostile and racist all the time, or scary and white fragility just dominating the whole thing? How can I create access for other people?
Yeah, I think pretty much that also one thing is that all that is necessary. Like, so we need the people who is doing the daily, very quick actions. We need the people who is like making the strategy, the people who is measuring. Like there is so like we cannot prescind of one another. That's the reality. And I think that, for example, one of the goals of this gathering was to get more understanding, right? I invite you to close your eyes 10 seconds and think if you think that you gain some more understanding today, or there is something that you feel like, maybe I could research, maybe I could even Google that. Maybe I could research on that. Because I think that's key. And it's not necessarily everything about funding and measuring, as you say. Sometimes it's just about approaching to someone that you hear or meet today and ask, how did you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes like I feel that the questions are complex, but many of the actions are very simple. I was thinking about our role as critical friends, and to be critical, and we are critical, and we have been along the way in many ways. But I'm thinking that critical doesn't only entail, even though it also entails a little bit of being a contrarian and not necessarily oppositional, but questioning. But being critical is also, I think, the ability to make visible that which is not necessarily very visible. And in the earlier panel, there was a question of why are we still here? And we had a discussion during the break that are we still here, like 6 years later? And I feel that a lot has been done already. That a lot of work is already in place. A lot of things have already changed. But if we're only measuring the end goal that, okay, now we are diverse, then everything and all the work that happens in between gets lost, and it's harder to continue because it's not recognized. And that work is very tedious, as Päiviö said, the incremental change is slow. It doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be done. It means that it has to keep happening even though it doesn't necessarily look like change. But that also means that it has to be resourced and it has to be enforced, even though we do not always see it. There was also talk in our group about, or it was in one of the sessions where I was, about what becomes visible. And as an artist, I feel like anytime artists come together, that's when we create the art, that's when we do the work. But then thinking back to my days in Taike and being in this kind of position, I realized this is not where the work is done. That this is where we come maybe to share good practices, maybe connect, and then the work is done elsewhere. But to the arts field, we don't see that work. And I think it would be quite necessary to see and to know and to be able to trust that the work is being done. And maybe also take part in it.
Yeah, I was actually one, because I think that criticality comes out a lot also of love, because we care. You need to put a lot of effort to criticize something. You care for that thing, right? And we also criticize each other. Yes. We are. So I was the person like frustrated, like, oh, but we are in the same, and you were like, no, but we are not in the same actually. So and it made me to think a lot about, for example, today we are trying to wave this 6 years ago conversation in a Nordic level to the Nordic Baltic. And it seems so difficult to even agree on one country or one country limits, whatever, thing about our own strategy, or what do we need to prioritize? So how to do it in a Nordic Baltic level? What do you think that would be like the starting point? what will be the starting point for trying to wave this Nordic-Baltic framework in arts and culture towards making an effort towards increasing, like, visibly, like, the accessibility, diversity, and inclusion?
I think we need to get on the same page of what we're talking about when we talk about diversity. Like Isa had pointed out, when we start thinking about ourselves or others, this room, the next room, this building, what do we want to say when we're saying we want diversity or we want equity? What is it? So if we want to do it together, maybe we can, if not the same sentence or the same paragraph, at least maybe the same page, same book. That would be nice. And then we can start
with leadership too.
What
is leadership?
Yeah, what is leadership? David, do you want to go into philosophical? But no, but really, like said before, if we are measuring things, if we are looking into goals, if we are trying to not even step into a new phase, age, anything, we need to have that conversation together. What do we mean by this? Because it means different things to different people and different communities and different instances and contexts.
Excellent point, Monica. What does it mean to you?
Diversity. I think it means that every single type of life needs to be taken into consideration. How we exist on this planet. Starting from how did we come here to Oulu, to what did we put into our systems, where did we lie our head, who are we connecting, what are we connecting with? But then, we can always go into that, and then we have like a conference that takes us, 30 days, but,
Yeah, I mean, to build on what has been said, I think for me the perfect example here in Finland is I've sat on juries, I've now worked with institutions, attended a lot of seminars, and we always run into this question, how can we be more inclusive or diverse in a way that, minorities, for example, get interested and participate. And for myself, it's a lot about relationship building and how to build meaningful relationships with different sort of communities and individuals. And that's not an easy task. A lot of these questions tie down to much broader societal questions. But we also, listening to all of you speak, we have to sort of look at who's doing the work, how is it visible, and how do we sort of make that work be part of our own daily lives, not just on these seminar floors, mainly with like theoretical questions or like displays of some sort of plan, but in sincerity, I feel like the main problem, and I can mostly speak to Finland, is that Finnish institutions and organizations don't know how to build meaningful relationships with minorities in Finland. And therefore you see a lack of people trying to apply for funding, trying to apply for positions, work. That would then bring about its own kind of change. Representation is not an answer. We can see diverse representations, but the same structures continuing. But then again, it's like I'm always speaking to a room full of highly educated people. We're asking the same questions. How do we become more diverse? And nobody has a clear-cut answer, but we have to try something. And like Julian said, we're doing things. We've seen change, but still it's not substantial enough that we can say that we're equal now, or we have reached the level of diversity. But that's why, and this is the philosophical me, we have to start from defining what diversity is, what equity is. And most likely then we have to start giving something up. And giving something up is not easy for us because a lot of people here have worked hard for gaining what they have, and change brings about uncertainty.
Yeah.
So that's why I think this is a hard question to crack.
Yeah.
And we're all searching for solutions, and we're trying to land the plane without crashing it.
Thank you, Päivi. Let's land that plane. When listening to you, I notice a lot coming up for me, and therefore it made me want to share this observation. Critical friends are here to observe this this seminar, and what I have noticed is, because you mentioned how to make those relationships so it comes down to connection, right? And then disconnection. Why is the connection hard to create and then keep up, maintain and nourish? Well, I think in this seminar, for example, there has been a lot of, feelings, sensations, thoughts, observations that come up, but they go unnoticed. Do we put into words when we feel uncomfortable? Do we put into words when we're like, hold up, what did that person just say? I did not even understand. We just go on and on and on. Where is the space to reflect what goes on inside of our diverse selves? And if we do not have that space, then, for example, whiteness, Finnishness goes completely unchallenged. And it is the norm, and it dominates these spaces and makes it very different for different people of people who have been racialized in different ways to take part into these discussions. If us, like white Finns, are not challenging these systems in ourselves, they live in us, how can we be open to really connecting and being in that vulnerable space? And I think that space we do need to learn to be in and have the time and space to be in so we can create change. I don't think without this really hard work that brings up so much emotions, I can feel my heart going like this right now. Without this effort, how can we be really affected by each other and hear each other out? What do you think?
Yeah, I think exactly. We're to the point, and when we're discussing whiteness, it's not to say, because you look white, but it is the normativity of the spaces that we, take, create, situate. So how do we find those spaces within ourselves that somehow, because we are all in a way in flux and always, I like to argue that we are all somehow against the norm. None of us fit the norm perfectly or in a way that it's meant to. So how do we find that space and place within ourselves and then go, but in a way that is constructive and being okay, hold up, we have to take a pause, sit down, drink some water, and then process, reassess, come back, and what do we then see and what can we then kind of challenge and change? Because I think that it's, and thank you, Isa, for bringing so personal matters to the table of okay, these are the things that made it difficult for me to participate. And sometimes we go by our days without even noticing it because we're not really sitting in our body in that way. But how many of those are so normative that most likely 95% of the people in this room, me counted in, did not even notice the things, or that 95% did not notice the things that I noticed. So how can we challenge that norm or those norms in a way that then can create change, and how they have been already challenged and things that have been changed and that worked or did not work?
So will you say, for example, that... Will you say, for example, that actually challenging is something that you train? Like challenge yourself. You can challenge yourself in a daily basis. And
Oh yeah.
Like no one.
You don't actually have to wear shoes that are uncomfortable, people. You can buy another pair or get another pair that is actually comfortable. That's also a challenge I had to learn. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm getting to this sharing moment circle. A bit like it connects to me a lot with transparency and fragility, which are words that institutional, like what this is like no, but we already established that institutions are made of people, so the boundaries between people and institutions are always a bit yellow, but that's the thing. Like if we are. I, to some extent, also, I'm afraid to fail, so I don't share, so I'm not transparent, so I'm not, when it's done, then I saw you. But if I don't have an accountability community, people around me to challenge me also, how my work is gonna change? What? You have something in your soul. Meanwhile, you discuss, I would say, like, so please share with each other, what are you doing? What are you struggling with? What are you not sure, but you are still doing it, but you are not really sure about? Like, we fail every day, so like we already fail. We can just improve.
Yeah, I think like with the work that I have done on institutional levels, maybe not in the moment, but in retrospect, it surprises me when you said fragility. I was really thinking about it, that why is this work so scary? That why are we so afraid that the quality, or that there's this claim that the quality of work that is done cannot be done anymore if we start to think about these questions? Whilst there are a whole lot of other things that are actually hindering the work, the quality of work, because I have never seen a work and thought, it would have been better if it was less diverse. It's literally it's a measure of quality. Like usually diverse work is better work. So then it's I've been thinking like that fragility and rigidity, the things are so stiff that they cannot change. But if you touch it with the question of diversity, it will break into millions of pieces. And that sort of conundrum confuses me still.
I want to say something that was... I want to say something because, but because we still are to define what is diversity. And we were also discussing this among ourselves. Like, it is nice to get a sneak peek to this organization working with disability, this organization working with this and that. But what about a full panel of differently able or disabled artists? What about a panel with the Black artists, cultural workers? What about the... because sometimes maybe, yes, less diversity, we can get deeper, like...
True. Specific diversity.
Yes, a specific diversity.
True.
I mean, in that sense, I think I brought that up. I think, because we have these situations and coming together are so few and far between still. So I think we try to cover all the bases. So we try to get all the colors of the rainbow into one room.
Yeah.
And then get like a wholesome picture of everything. And then again, then we have to exercise. Arthur Jaffa, I listened to one of Arthur Jaffa's interviews, and I think he put it quite succinctly. He said that, I'm not trying to talk to white people, or I'm just talking to my people. And then I get to put on I put out works of art that talk to them, and then maybe other people can watch them as well, and exercise a muscle that they don't typically get to exercise. So, for example, a lot of movies and stories have been revolving around the white male. So we've all gotten to exercise that muscle on how that sort of world revolves and what that experience is like. But then to have like all-black panel, for example, people rarely get to exercise that muscle on how blackness is not a monolith, not as, it's a bunch of cultures, people thinking individuals. And I think when one of the first panels referred to intersectionality, I think that the whole point is that what we share between us is that we're all different. That's it. And with our differences, we have to come together and try to set a set of principles. How do then we move towards those principles? And how do we make it equitable? It's not, the work is never ending. It will never stop. But it's a dynamic world, and we have the ability and power to set principles and then work towards them and implement them at the same time. So I think that's why we come together and talk about this, because things will change. What we think now, we set the goals and then we reach some of them, but we're not finished. So in 10 years, 5 years, we have to come together and say, okay, but something shifted. And then because something shifted, we might need to do something else. We have blind spots, and then again, we can fix them or not, but we can try to do something when we can do something, not just try, but do. And that's why we're here.
Thank you so much, Päivi, for, you were bringing that up. How we are with the time? Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I can say something brief. Yeah, I think this, just to recap a little bit what you guys already said from the maybe point of view of disability. Like if diversity becomes ticking certain boxes, then we are actually unifying a group of people. Like, okay, let's have this panel and there needs to be one Sami voice. Yeah, we talked about this. And then you will tell us, you will represent. All Sapmi issues are here today. Yeah. So glad to have you. We're lucky. No, we are. But that we then actually do. Losing my thought. We do fall into the racist stereotypes. Like racism is so much, at least I have noticed in myself, about universalizing, right? Like these people and their thought about this. At that point, we are already lost. And not saying that all of us here would think this simply, but I do want to point that out, that can come to my head as well today. Like, and then I have to notice, and I have to be like, come on, don't fall into that white narrative. But anyway, and from the disability perspective, I hear this stereotype. It's been said to my face even, are the angry disabled people coming after me again because we don't have access info? And I'm like, kind of yes. Kind of yes. So kind of yes, but what if there was then a panel discussion of 10 angry disabled people? Like, I would love us to fight about what we think of diversity, what we think of accessibility, how do we all think some work should be done? Because we have so many different perspectives and experiences. Some are furious that I use this vocabulary of crip, for example, cripple. And I have my own reasons to use it to provoke thoughts and invite people to think of what is disability even, and why would I use this like old derogatory term anyway. But there are so many discussions going on between people. So could we make space for that? I think that is one proposition we are coming up with today. So
yes. Someone? Okay. So I'm just going to say that I want to remind this again. I think it's important because maybe some of you are thinking like, these people nagging here, like what for? Like, they really care. Like I can speak for us. I think that we really care for not only for our career, our friends' careers, no, the field, we are really invested in this. So this comes from care. We are approachable also. So I just would like to maybe take a tiny second to think, if you want to think about something that either you hear today or a thought that spark and that you would like to continue on that. I know that there was already a concrete proposition, so if that's enough also, if you don't want to add anything else, but if there is something from today, a conversation, a project, an idea that you think like, I think this is important, I would like that this goes further. Maybe let's share it. And also I invite you to think about it. I'm gonna think about it because I'm talking and I'm not thinking about it.
I can share. I'll give you a second to think before I talk.
No, I definitely, since the morning from Jada's presentation keynote about democracy. And I think this is something that we really, really, really need to start thinking about. We are, especially in the Nordics, living in this illusion of this Nordic exceptionalism, of our socialism, of our democracy. But look at where we're at. What does this mean? Not only this room, but where we're at. All these countries where all the people who are sitting in those positions, as said, it's not the people who are actively bad, but it is sitting in the silence. So let's think about democracy from that point of view.
Yeah, that is a very important point. I, as an artist who believes in the creation of futures, I honestly, in my art, believe that the artist's duty is to dream forth a better world. I think that is our primary function. And living in Oulu, I also recognize that it's the engineers that will build it eventually, but the artists have to dream it forth so the engineers can build it. But a lot of it has to do when I'm talking about futures and thinking about futures. I'm not thinking about the future that is far away. I'm thinking about the future that we are creating already. And recognizing that we are creating multiple futures at the same time. Like singularly we are, but also each of us are creating multiple different futures. And in those choices in the now, we can recognize the things that we are already creating, the things that are already being birthed out of our mere existence and our active choices that we are making today. And taking from today stuff that I've heard, I wrote this one sentence that utopias have to and will be built on existing structures. That we've already built a lot and we are continuing from there. So we have to understand how those structures will influence the way we are, not will build, but how we are building our future already. That's my takeaway for today.
So I want to continue there. This highly resonates with me. Like how we can really think, like what like power art has. We can like gather, we can come together, we can dream about a better futures. We can like, we all putting our time and effort and we decide to like gather somewhere. So, and that's like pretty rare. And like how, I'm just thinking like, okay, and also dreaming is also a privilege. Okay, what I can dream, how I can dream of that, also like all the other people could dream. So maybe I'm just now reflecting on that, like how we could also make the art field more accessible, more, really on all levels, and not only for us individually, but really what would it mean? Yeah.
I can go. Okay, some kind of question to continue with. Well, this all made me perhaps think that how can we work together with difference, across difference, without too much focusing or weaponizing identity. So, for example, I come here and I'm like, I am a disabled person. But when does that come, I am a disabled person, an obstacle, a wall between me and people who the society hasn't yet disabled? How can I meet people across difference without building some kind of shelter from my identity? I don't know. This is what I am thinking.
Short and sweet. Time to wrap it up. Yes. Yeah. I'm going to meditate on how to give up something to gain something better.
Nice.
I don't have a microphone. It's time? Yes. Okay, it's time. Thank you so much for having us. We will be here, so talk with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a great panel discussion. It was a very important discussion for all of us, and I'm sure we all got new ideas and a lot to think about. We will now move on to the final speech of the day. It's Minna Karvonen, who is a director at Department for Art and Cultural Policy at the Ministry of Education and Culture here in Finland. Welcome.
So, do you hear me? Yes? Okay. After this, could I describe it as a panel which was maybe the best I've ever listened to, and I'm 59 years old, civil servant. It's really, really hard to give any kind of closing remarks. So, first of all, thank you for what you have given me. But now to the official part of my remarks. So thank you, speakers, thank you, partners. I would like to express my heartfelt thank you to all the amazing keynote speakers, the panelists, the experts in all sessions, and the very, very, very active participants. My warmest thank you to all our partners, the City of Oulu, our foundation, Oulu Foundation 2026, Arts Promotion Center Finland, Sami Parliament, Culture for All, and Globe Art Point. Your organizational support, your insight, and cooperation have been invaluable. And very, very special thank you for the most warmest hospitality of the city of Oulu. This day has been like really packed with visionary viewpoints and active dialogue on different aspects of cultural diversity and inclusion and what it means for democracy. In subsessions, we have concentrated on arts education, data and research, leadership and power, arts funding, and equitable creative economy in arts and tech. All these themes are really extremely important and topical in cultural policy work in all Nordic countries and Baltic countries. After this seminar, we have more knowledge, and we have more insight, we have more contacts between colleagues, and I really, really, really hope that we will continue our diversity efforts together. Reflection panel that I was referring to by critical friends, Finland brought up many important points, and it will really help us to step to next level and to crack difficult questions. It's important for us that the to ensure, all of us, to ensure that the discussion remains as it was now transparent in the future as well. It has been marvelous to be here and listen to this amount of honesty. And now to a small sidestep to another seminar. I attended an EU meeting on cultural diplomacy supporting democratic and cultural resilience in Ukraine just yesterday in Copenhagen. And what I have there as kind of takeaways are that the importance of both freedom of speech and artistic freedom of expression were highlighted throughout the seminar. We also talked quite a lot about uncertain times and how they can and often do make artists and cultural practitioners cautious in their creative work. And I truly think that in order to strengthen democracy and resilience, it's important to ensure that political influence, rapid changes in the operating environments, and reduced funding don't lead to self-censorship, whether cautious or uncautious. And now, my minister, Talvitie, emphasized the importance of cultural policy report. That's the hot topic now in Finland. And the only thing that I would like to say about it, and there they go, just a sec, is that the report defines culture as right for all, emphasizing the importance of accessibility and equality. These challenges us all to ensure that culture services are available to everyone, regardless of background, location, or financial resources. This will be really, really hard work for all of us, and it requires participation from all of us. Now I'm going to find my... because this was a difficult seminar to wrap up. Now, dear friends, it has been said today that the policy journey is long and shared. And you can't do everything, but everybody can do something. So let's act as platforms of change, as individuals, as networks, as institutions like me, and as NGOs. I would like to add something quite personal. I dare to claim that the most important skill for us as individuals and as members of our communities is self-reflection. And I'm ready to reveal my worst enemy, that's apathy. So, thank you to all of you. I would once more thank you all, and for you who are staying here till tomorrow, in Oulu you have the beautiful possibility to take part in cultural site visits. I'm sure there's quite a lot to see, especially with a view to the next year when Oulu will be the European Capital of Culture, and that's why I now warmly welcome again you to Finland and to Oulu, the European Capital of Culture, next year. So thank you all.